All right, welcome back, you beautiful humans, to another episode of Naked Sunday. I am your host, Caleb Nelson, and I have my new friend, Geoff Seow. Am I saying that correctly?
It's CO, but
Co?
it's
Oh,
okay.
damn it!
Everyone makes that mistake. So good.
I always ask beforehand, and today, of course, I mess up. Forgive me, my friend. I forget names like you wouldn't believe because I just meet a lot of people all the time, but I hate when I mess up the names. It's just a thing. But thanks for joining me on the show today, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
I like to start off every episode with, as much as we just talked about, I have really almost no structure. I have very minute little things I like to touch on. I like to tell everybody, I like to tell my guests why I appreciate them, because I think we should live in a world where we share with each other why we care about each other. We've talked for all of 5 minutes. We have not spoken before this juncture right now. And I just believe you got a solid vibe about you. You are a coach. I was saying that before. Like anybody who's in the coaching field, clearly you aspire to help other people. You have this very grounded, calm, steady energy, and that I'm assuming serves you very well in your coaching practice. And especially as you say, when I looked at your website, you're working with millennials, and I think this age group, the millennial age group, is really open to growth and connection and working with people that are helping empower them to live a better life. So I think what you're doing is awesome, and I'm just excited to get to know you a little better today.
Yeah, thanks, Caleb. That's a great introduction, and yeah, I love what I do. It's awesome, and I can't wait to share it in the podcast.
Love it, brother. So let's start off with this, Geoff. Like, you know yourself better than I do. So who are you?
Right, yeah. So I'm a man that hails from the land down under. I'm from Perth, Western Australia, and I am the founder of MindAxis Life Coaching. And as you know, you mentioned just before, man, like I specifically coach millennials, and there's purely one reason I do that, and it's because I am one. So I understand, the struggles that we face. I understand the difficulties and also how to overcome it. My story begins, if I were to, kind of just like encapsulate it. I used to suffer from, bad drug addiction for a long time, right? For about 9 years. You mentioned you ran a gym for 10 years. I
Yeah.
was a drug addict for 9 years, right? During this time, it wasn't like I wasn't doing anything. I went through university, got 3 university degrees. I just was good at studying, right? And also good at doing drugs. And then I went into corporate, um, all while just doing this in the background, and my life just was really unfulfilled. It's what my coaching today is for other unfulfilled millennials, because I know what it's like to really be at a really shit point in your life, where you just don't know where things are going. And I came out of that 2 years ago, right? So it took a lot of time. The gym actually saved my life. So it's great that you own a gym, because the gym saved my life. I went to the
Wow.
gym every single day for like 6 months. It helped me
Wow.
change everything in my life, right? It was a very important component. It wasn't the whole story, but was an important component. And I sit here today as a life coach. And it's been a great journey. A lot of things have happened, but I'm sure we'll unravel more as we go through this podcast.
I love it, man. I love that. Secondarily, by the way, I should have said I also love your accent. I love accents in general. I think it's like a cool part of like character and personality. I love it. I can't do an Australian accent worth the life of me, so it's cool. Um, so wow, drug addiction for 9 years. Was it all drugs? Like, was there anything specific? And also, what was driving that? What led you down that path?
Right, it wasn't all drugs. I wasn't stupid enough to try things like methamphetamine. I didn't try meth. I didn't try heroin. I didn't try like the really really hard stuff, just the party stuff, right? Like weed, MDMA, cocaine. What led me down that path, I guess, is like the desire to fit in, and also the desire to like overcome events in my past that I didn't like. So rather than face them, I tried to fit in by getting into the party scene. So I used to party a lot. I remember when I was in university in my second year, I was 18 years old, and I partied every weekend that year, and I didn't even have a job.
Wow.
So that was yeah, literally, it was not good times for me, So, but I was addicted to that, the whole scene. I was addicted to everything about it, right? Because it helped me forget about what I was trying to run away from. And when I begin to confront it, is when things in my life really began to shift.
What was what was the turning point? So you said you went to the gym, but what preceded that moment where you're like, all right, something about this is not working with what I want for myself. What was that like? And then take me on the journey of like, what was this self-evaluation process, confronting, as you had mentioned, whatever you feel comfortable sharing, like, what were you confronting?
So that's a great question. And yeah, it obviously, like, I encapsulated a lot before saying it was just overnight. It was not. So for a long time, I had really begun in my head. See, like, I wanted to quit for a long time because I was smoking, drinking, doing drugs. I wanted to quit for years. I just didn't know how. Because in Perth, there is a massive drug problem in Perth, right? The youth love drugs in Perth. Like, it's so normalized. It's like the moment that you turn 18, it's like it's normalized. Like, drugs are so normal here. You don't even think twice, right? There's no stigmatism for them on the streets. So I got into that pretty easily, and you can get drugs so easily in Perth. It's actually insane. But so when I actually bought a book many years ago, and I had bought it and left it in my bookshelf, and I never actually made the time to read it until I decided to start reading on the way to work because I wanted to kind of fill my life with some kind of knowledge. So I picked up this book called The 50th Law by Robert Greene and 50 Cent. It is an amazing book, and long story short, the book teaches you about how to really understand the importance of sobriety. This might seem stupid, but before that point, I had never considered that a life without drinking or smoking or drugs was even like a feasible thing for me. I thought it was always going to be a part of my life. I thought that I had built it into my identity, man. Like, can you imagine after 8 years of doing that? I was that guy. So I built it into my identity. And then I read this book and I was like, wow. So 50 Cent used to deal drugs in the street, used to party, but he used to fill up his alcohol bottles with water. And he seriously, the guy does not drink alcohol, he doesn't do drugs, he doesn't smoke, even though he grew up in that environment. And the reason he never did it was because he watched everyone die around him. Like, literally everyone he grew up with died around him. Wow. And then after he got shot 9 times, I mean, he was never doing it before, but that changed his entire perspective. And reading that completely just flipped my mind. I was like, what am I doing with my life in a way that had never happened before? So I knew that I needed to make a change, and the way I started to make that change is with the gym, right? I've always had a gym membership. Sometimes I did it more than other times. Now I've been consistently gymming for 2 years, but like at this period in time, I wasn't attending the gym for a long period of time. I didn't go for like months at that stage, like probably 6 months. I just started going, and I went every single day, and I tried the most ridiculously hard workouts. I just showed up every day after work, and I stayed there for 2 hours, and I went home. For like literally, I just like went to work, went to the gym, went home, and never broke a workout. Even today, still never broken a workout. It's still impact 2 years later. I will always complete a workout no matter what. And doing so and starting to really wean off these substances, getting off the drugs, first of all. I tried to quit smoking and drugs on the same day. It went terribly. Do not do that if you're out there. Do them one at a time. And then I quit smoking, quit drinking at last as well, a little while ago. Quit drinking about 6 months ago. So I don't do anything now. I just train, live healthy, live good, do my coaching. But it's a massive change, and it really changed when I discovered that the life I was living was untenable. It had to be changed, and I had to change my habits, and that was a major factor.
I mean, it's always powerful when somebody else's story can hit real close to home and say, whoa, I can change this. Were you also seeing friends, family, or just like people in your social circle, I guess at that time, also kind of falling by the wayside or dying of overdoses or whatnot? What were you seeing there?
Not really. They just weren't doing anything with their lives. They just weren't doing it. No overdoses. Like I said, like like I was doing that, but my circles weren't like the kind of like meth and heroin circles. Like that's a different type of friend group, and like I've always been, at least clued on enough to know, like, don't do that, because that's not where I ever wanted my life to go. That's the dark route, right? So, but a lot of my friends were not exactly doing the things that they wanted to with their life, but it was less about them and more about me.
Yeah.
I lost a lot of friends in the process of becoming sober. I still kept all my close childhood friends. Like, we're still close and we're still tight. But all the other people I picked up in the party days, the drinking, the drugs, they've all just scattered. We don't keep in touch anymore because we don't have anything in common. I cannot hang out to go drinking. I cannot hang out to do drugs. I just won't do it. I won't compromise my self-esteem to do that.
I think that takes a lot of strength to be able to walk away from the social acceptance that you brought
Yeah.
up. Again, it's centered around this vehicle of getting high or, drunk or whatever the thing is. And I think I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this. I had a long conversation with a new friend of mine yesterday on a podcast, and he does a lot of work with hypnotherapy. And we were talking a lot about the subconscious. And where I'm going with this is my feeling, whether it's true or not, is that our subconscious is aware in some way, shape, or form that if we are going to go on a true transformation, to let go of this habit that is not serving us, it's aware that not everybody's coming with. And that fear of letting go of people or not being accepted, I think that deep down is a massive, massive driver for a lot of people and why they don't ever take the first step, because it's just like, well, if I don't have this thing to connect on, what do I connect on? And that's terrifying, man. Now especially as you had mentioned, that was, and correct me if I misheard, that getting into that scene was part of you feeling more accepted in your life. What was that like? So like did you feel like an outsider before that? Like when you were growing up, what was going on there?
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely stems from that feeling of being an outsider. And it started, I guess, from childhood. So like in Australia, back in the early 2000s, it was a rough time to be an Asian kid. All right, let's put it that way. It was a rough time. And I actually spoke about my entire story about that on a podcast this morning, where I just went really deep into the nitty gritty about it. And it was rough to do that. And there's always been like an identity issue, right? And there's a lot of Asian Australians or even immigrants come to Australia, because the thing about Australia is that Australia is a very specific style of culture, right? And say, for example, myself, I'm half Portuguese, I'm half Chinese, and I'm born in Australia, right? But here's the thing is, I don't have the same skin color, I don't have the same background. It's not the same. So growing up, the main appeal, and I've spoken to a lot of people in similar situations, is to obviously try to fit in, because Australian culture is very distinct. And at that particular stage, it was very unfiltered. Like right now in Australia, in Perth, you go everywhere and there's like, Asian shops, different things from different cultures. Back when I was a kid, those things were not even a thing. You had to go overseas. So here we only had what we understood. And growing up, you try to fit into that. You always try to fit into that. And I've spoken to many other people in the same situation. You try because it's all you want to be a part of, but very rarely do you get accepted into that scenario. So for me, especially growing up, it was a lot about trying to fit into this particular idea of someone I needed to be, of trying to be a white Australian. Like, for example, I speak like an Australian. I am not an Australian. I am born in Australia, but my ancestry is not, if you know what I mean, right? And that's where the incongruence comes from.
Yeah.
So growing up and things like that, I was very lucky to go to a multicultural high school. There were many different people from different corners of the world. That was great. But before that, I went to all Australian high school. So I was the only Asian kid. So that was an interesting experience. But moving forward through time, it was all about really trying to fit into everything I went to. If I went to a party, I wanted to fit in. If I wanted to go out, I wanted to fit in, just so you can gain the most from a scenario, but because, if you're fitting in, you're always going to gain the most from a scenario. You're going to be able to meet the most people, do the most things. And to do that, you have to adapt. And if everyone's drinking, smoking, and doing drugs, it's a little bit hard. So you always try and fit in. And for me, for many years, I had an identity issue. I didn't know who I was, didn't know what I was doing. All I knew was that if I fit in and felt accepted, that was good enough. And that's where it started from. Man.
Now with that, you said you went off into like the corporate culture as well, and this that kept going. So take me through that, like that middle stage there, because again, like moving into the workforce and things like that, how was that? I'm curious just to hear how these things that kept like infiltrating your life through all of that.
Well, for a lot of the time, I've always flooded myself with commitments. So during that whole period of time, I was working many jobs. I was at university. I was always keeping myself busy. And then literally my only downtime will be smoking a joint, smoking at least a couple of joints and then going to bed or something like that, right? And then as I started to move through time, I started to actually go to different jobs, and I did a lot of things in this period of time. Don't get me wrong, I was a very high functioning drug addict. I owned multiple businesses during this time. I literally like did a lot of things with different careers. I went all over, I tried many different things. And then I found myself doing clinical research. I did that for 2 years. I climbed through the ranks pretty easily, pretty quickly. It was a very interesting field, but that's particularly where it all started to reach a head, is when, there was a big congruence, man. You can imagine, like, I'm surrounded by people who, like in terms of like at the stage I was like 23, 24, but quite still young, but I was surrounded by people that were much older than me, right? I was directly communicating and running projects with people that were 40 and 50 around the world. And I was a young 23, 24-year-old guy. They never knew I was this young because of my voice. I sound like an old man, but I was still very young, and I never told them my age. But so yeah, there was such an incongruence. You're talking to people in America, you're talking to people in Europe, and you're talking about running these big pharmaceutical projects that span, the globe. And then you go home and smoke a couple of joints and go out and party on the weekends. And there was just there was starting to become a big rift in the middle. It was like, what's going on here? Why am I carrying my past into a future I'm trying to create? And it started to really, I think I started to internally mature and started to realize that this is not right. This is not who I'm meant to be. I need to drop this shit, right? To actually grow up and move forward. And it took a lot of time. It took a lot of growth, but it all reached a head when, I used to show up to my office and just sit there and I get all my work done. I was always a very hard worker, but I used to have this real bad period of like depression in the office. I just sit there, just stare at the ceiling, just do nothing. I just couldn't tolerate my life. I just couldn't tolerate what was going on. I couldn't tolerate my job, the fact that I'd have to go home and like smoke to wash it away. It was a bad cycle. It was like this for about 6 months, like every day.
Wow.
Yeah. And then that's when things started to change. It was middle of 2020 that things really started to change for me.
2020 changed it all for you. So pandemic times.
The pandemic changed my life, man, like in a way that a
Wow.
lot of people would not agree with, because a lot of people were affected by the pandemic. I would say the pandemic probably saved my life. It gave me time to actually chill back and be like, what am I doing? Which I never
So
had before.
because with the pandemic, you were kind of like left more to yourself. You didn't like go into the office and that kind of stuff. So that's
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah, because during the pandemic it was probably some of my worst times with smoking weed, particularly. I mean, like at this stage of my life, I had dropped a lot of the harder drugs. I was just on weed, and I was smoking a lot of weed, like a lot of weed, and it was really starting to affect my life. Like I couldn't get up without smoking any weed. I couldn't go to bed without smoking any weed, and I was working from home. Everyone was working from home because of the pandemic, but for me, that was turning into a bit of a nightmare. But what it did leave me was a lot of time. Rather than spending, 2 hours a day commuting or spending time doing this and that, this and that. Now I had time to like literally just sit there and be like, what now? Like, what now? Like, what am I doing with my life? Like, you can only watch so much TV, you can only play so much games before you think like, what in the hell am I doing with my life? Because that's all I was doing. I was going to work and coming home and just watching TV and playing games. Today, I could never advocate for that. That's like so far removed from what I do. Seriously, like so far. But back then, that's all I knew how to do. I knew nothing else. I was like, I had so many creative projects I wanted to do, so many things I wanted to do. I just never did it until COVID happened and everything changed for me.
Wow. I'm enjoying your company even more, especially when we start talking about people who took advantage of the opportunity that I believe the pandemic afforded us. And I've personally referred in some ways that the pandemic was the great fast, because we were pulled away from things, whether we wanted to or not. And I don't know if you ever explored fasting. I mean, going towards sobriety is a sense of
Yeah.
is fasting, but I mean, I've done like 7-day water fast a few times, but the idea is to like take the thing away and sit with that space, much like you said, sit back with this time instead of commuting, where I just filled this time with mindless droning from one spot to another. Sitting in that space can be quite terrifying for a lot of people. It's like, I'm not doing something. What am I doing with this time? Oh, it's really cool to hear that you embraced that. However it came about, whether it was, forced or not. It's really cool that you decided, hey, I'm gonna make something of this. And then so within that, what was the spark to then say, you know what, this thing called life coaching, that inspires me. I want to go down that path. What lit that fire?
That's a really interesting question. And whenever I explain this, it's really weird because looking back, it's like, how does this even play out, right? But I bought a life coaching program, like an accreditation course, a long time ago. I probably bought it when I was 22, 23, like seriously, about 4 to 5 years ago. I never did it because I spent all my time smoking weed, but I bought it to help me get sober. I bought it because I needed help, but I didn't know who to go to. So I wanted to just study this life coaching. I didn't even know what life coaching was. I was just like, wow, okay, this could be useful. Around about that period of time when I sobered up, I was like, oh yeah, I bought that life coaching course. I'll give that a shot. So during that period of when I was training nonstop, I was also studying this life coaching course. And then the more I started to do it, the more I started to really go like, wow, this stuff is amazing. Like this stuff is like, it was like blowing my mind up. I was literally like realizing things about myself and confronting truths about myself that literally like, I was like, what is going on? Like, what am I seeing here? So I finished that course and I quickly bought another course. I bought a neuro-linguistic programming accreditation course. And I did that too pretty quickly. I was like, this is cool. And then I just kept learning widely. It all really pivoted on Christmas Day on 2020. Christmas Day on 2020. I decided, okay, I want to actually share this knowledge with the world. So I just created a random account called Your Daily Purpose on Instagram. It had no purpose apart from me to share philosophical quotes with the world. And it still exists today. I don't really use it, but it still exists. It got a big following very quickly. And then I kind of just let it do it. But I was just putting up philosophical posts and philosophical thoughts every day. And it helped me to stay sober. So I would actually put out messages about what I was thinking about a quote and about how people could improve their lives based on what I was learning, what I was studying, what I was researching. And then people started to message me. People started to say, hey, man, I really appreciate you putting out there. That really changed my day. Hey, man, like this has really changed everything for me. And I'm still in touch with quite a few people from that page today. And it was really quite insane because at that point I realized like, wow, I can actually provide value to this world. Before that, I never thought I was capable of it. I thought my entire life would just be me going to work a job and that's it. And like, it's not what I wanted, but I couldn't see a better way out of it, right? So when I started to do this, it started to really make me feel like, wow, people actually respect what I do. People actually, like they gain value from my thoughts and my insights. And that was a game changer for me. So combining Your Daily Purpose, my life coaching, my sobriety, my training, my mindset training, I started to really just go down into this, like, I would just say this tunnel of focus and change. Like my life started to change before my very eyes. Who I was just completely melted away. It just changed. And it really shows a lot can happen if you're consistent. I posted on that Instagram account every single day. And I went to the gym every day. I trained every day. I put myself in challenging situations every day. And that changed so much in my life.
I love when we start talking about habits because it's fairly simple. At the end of the day, here's like, I'm just going to post something every day. Here's my thoughts. And what I love is that initially, as you're saying, like, I'm going to share it with the world, but really this is also helping me stay sober. So it serves this self-care, but giving to others purpose at the same time, ironically, purpose right in that. Perhaps not ironically. But I love that you were also marrying that with the physical transformation as well, because I think a lot of people get caught on the six-pack ab thing and all that other jazz. And I've heard this quote and, take it where you want to with it. But like this quote has stuck with me a lot, that all growth is spiritual growth. I heard it from a life coach originally and reading it in a book right now. But as you were transforming your body, you were also transforming your mind. And you, by marrying the two, what I hear now in you is a different identity. If you only did one of those and you didn't change your mind at the same time, you really only shined the shell. The inside still needs to be, it still needs to be polished. It still needs to be addressed and taken care of. And too many people, it's like this cookie cutter thing. It's just this thing, or it's just that thing. Now, the access point might be a physical, it might be a very literal piece. But I love how you took the two things together and like, no, this is my daily habit for this. This is the daily habit for this. Now, obviously, your practice of this giving and sharing these thoughts and self-improvement with the world has shifted towards your business practice, which is beautiful. I think that it's matured itself into a new place. But I just think that, and you even said like, but your physical, you still go to the gym every day. You still put the physical practice, you put the physical work in, and are still combining those two works together. I couldn't be any happier for you, man. Like, it's awesome to hear, like, you're sober minded, and whether people have a drink or not, like, I'm people who like control in moderation, but like where where you are in your life and what you love and how you feel, and clearly it's allowing you to give all of yourself to your work and the people that you hope to serve. I think it's beautiful, man. That's not enough people just look within themselves and say, I'm going to do this and I'm just going to keep going. And so that's really, really cool, and challenging yourself. I loved hearing that too. You put yourself in uncomfortable situations every day and you're finding yourself as a different man, as a different person. And dude, that's so cool. That's so cool.
Thanks, man. Appreciate that.
Hey, we got to appreciate each other, man. That's what this world should be. Like, here's a guy who grew through some dark shit. I think that needs to be commended. So let's pivot now then to where you're at now. And now, like, let's talk about your work. Like, how does your work play out? What does this look like?
The work plays out in terms of programs that I have. So I've only got a few programs, and the programs are designed to help millennials that are stuck in their life, right? They're really stuck with what to do. They have no way forward, or they kind of have an idea of what they want, but they don't know how to get there, right? And similar to Geoff of the past, they have a vice holding them back, or they have something that's just limiting them, right? My coaching programs enable them to move past that and actually strategize a pathway forward. And it's a very, very interactive style of coaching. The coaching is the same as where we're at now. It's face-to-face, obviously, and it's international, but it's very interactive in the sense of I've compiled like a huge library for my clients. I've compiled a huge amount of resources that I share out. I just have a lot of stuff that I give as well to make sure that the sessions keep my clients accountable. I find that coaching without accountability is kind of just, it's not coaching, because you need to have your clients accountable to their actions. Without accountability, you're just throwing money down the toilet. You need to want that progress as much as your coach wants it for you, or vice versa, really, right? So my whole coaching programs are really based a lot around accountability, and also about building insight. We go very deep. We go deep into the human mind, and we understand exactly what you want, exactly what's holding you back, exactly where you'd like to be. And we put it all together, and we do it in an interactive format. And that's why my clients see a lot of success, because I've literally spent so much time building this. Like, I got obsessed about it. Like, literally, I spent so much time doing this. And I love what I do, because it's literally the essence of like you have no idea, like a lot of work. And it feels good to really see the results of my clients.
That's awesome, man. Considering you work primarily with millennials, what are some of the big things that you're seeing that specifically millennials struggle with? Like, what's like some of the overarching themes we're seeing?
Oh, definitely fears. Limiting beliefs are a massive one. In fact, every single person that I've ever worked with has had a limiting belief. Yeah, every single person, but that's normal. That's normal. You would almost expect it from most people. Another one would also be an understanding of how to get to where they want to go. So, for example, they know what they want. Like, say, for example, they would like to get this particular job or open this particular business, but they have no comprehension of like time or strategy or how to do it or why they want to do it. And touching on that, the major thing is the why. So a lot of the time, as you were talking about before, you were saying that, people get really focused on the six pack and the abs, right? And that's a lot of people. They're so focused on the external that they don't realize that the internal is probably way more. It's about 75-25. You change your inner world, your outer world is going to change. But a lot of the time, these goals are tied to external rewards, like, for example, their body or the money. And if you don't have a strong why for why you want to do it, a major problem I've also seen is repetitive quitting, giving up. And I can resonate with that. In the past, I gave up on like literally everything I tried. This was like before I became a scuba, I just gave up consistently. And you always give up if you don't have a strong reason for why you want to do it. If you don't have a reason for like, okay, I'm doing this not just for me, maybe it's for my family, maybe it's for other people I want to impact, maybe it's because I want to give back to the world. If you don't have a strong why, well, then the how and the what isn't really going to work anyways. You have to have a why, and then everything will flow from there.
I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek's work, Start With Why. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say you've read that as well. Yeah.
I've not, but I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek.
It's a great book. His original TED Talk around that flipped my life on its head. That was, probably what, 2010 or 11, somewhere there. But his second and third books, I was actually talking about this yesterday, Leaders Eat Last. And then his third book is The Infinite Game, which I think you'd find both of those equally appealing. And anybody who's listening, I also highly recommend both of them. In fact, I might even take Infinite Game. I might even take Leaders Eat Last first, if I was to go back to it now. Anyway, as an aside, that was my aside. So what I'm hearing in all that is that perhaps millennials are not feeling really, maybe we are feeling called, but have not discovered deeper sense of purpose. Perhaps that's where like what's falling short with that, where a lot of people are feeling a little lost and not having direction because there isn't something that internally, intrinsically guiding them. Is that what I was hearing?
That's one of the variables. That's one of the variables that holds a lot of them back. Not all of them. Like I said, everyone is different. We're all different, but the same at the same time, if you know what I mean, right? We're all humans. We all have similar problems. We all have similar challenges because we're all humans. But the way in which they are expressed is different for everybody based on their childhood, their conditioning, their upbringing, right? So for certain individuals, it might be not being very clear on what they want out of life based on their personality type. But if they want something, then discovering their why is very important. But for other people, it might be they know their why, they know what they want. Let me give you an example. So like this, I've spoken to somebody who wanted to be a rapper, right? And he knew what he wanted. He knew he wanted to be a rapper. He knew he wanted to be doing positive work in the world, but he couldn't do it. And because he was afraid. He was afraid of making that leap, making that next step, right? And long story short, once we identified that, a lot of things began to change. And it makes me so happy to see, man. Like, honestly, it makes me so happy because that fear of what he could have had, and now he's going for it because he's aware of the fact that every time he lets that fear control him, that destiny, that life moves further and further away. So it's multivariable. It's either something in the way or it's not having something to begin with.
Let's dive a little more into the fear piece. What are, the two big things I hear of are fear of failure and fear of success. I'd love to get your opinions and your take on both of those things and how you see that play out with people.
The fear of failure is massive for one reason, because it is self-sabotage, right? It's like before you eat, okay, let's say you wanted to go and try out for your local rugby team, yeah? I don't know if they have rugby where you're at.
We got rugby. I never played though.
You got rugby?
We got rugby, but it wasn't my thing. We got more American football. That's kind of our bit around here. But yeah, there is rugby. Yeah. Not as popular.
Okay, well, let's say you spent your whole life playing tennis, right? And when you were a child, you tried playing rugby once and you broke a tooth. And that's a horrible accident. You're just like, you know what? I hate rugby. And as you grow up, you start getting into rugby again because all your friends are into rugby. You start watching and you're like, you know what? I've been training for so long. I want to go try out for the rugby team. And then you just don't do it because you expect yourself to fail. I know that might be a really terrible example, but I think you understand where I'm coming from, is that you apply a past event to a future outcome, and then that is a fear of failure, fear that you're going to fail again. And it can be debilitating because it can stop you from really moving forward to what you want, because you think, okay, if I try, I'm going to fail anyways, right? If I don't, I used to be an academic tutor, and a lot of students think like that too. It's like, what's the point of trying? I'm going to fail anyways, right? So that's a massive one. And the fear of success is the opposite, right? The fear of success is like, okay, I've got everything in play, everything is good, but I just want to do it at this this moderate level that's safe. This moderate level that, isn't impacting too many people, isn't impacting me. I just want to have a quiet life. That's kind of like someone that has a small business owner mindset, right? Someone that can really do a lot of good work, but chooses to hold themselves back out of humility. And I would say humility because humility is a good thing. It keeps you grounded, but humility in excess can stop you from achieving larger goals, because goals and ambition is quite the opposite of humility, actually. Once you have an ambition to achieve something, to have humility means that you couldn't possibly have that ambition because you're going to hold yourself back all the time. So you've got to have an even ground. You've got to have an even ground of understanding where you come from, what your values and your ethics are, and then go hard for it because that's what you want. It's going to provide a good value to the world. But if you have too much humility, it can stop you from actually doing that because you feel like you're going to have to need to take this or do that, and it really just puts it out of proportion. So that's where the balance comes into play. So that's my 2 cents.
That's an interesting take on humility. I haven't heard somebody's angle on that like that, and I see where you're coming from, and I agree with you. I'm gonna see if I can push it even a little bit further, just from my own observations and just your take on that. I would kind of ponder the idea that the humility in there is really a mask of a mask, and it's not even true humility. It's leaning on that as a cover up, and then not really being honest with, like, I do want more. I would even then from that, I think the fear of success comes with this idea or this fear of, if I get all that stuff, am I going to be capable of carrying that burden? I think there's a weight in that. It's like, oh, like, I don't know what that looks like. And what if I blow up then? What if, like, can I keep all of these balls in the air while I'm juggling whatever? And I think the humility serves as a great way to be like, no, but I'm like, this is good, and that's why I saw those two things becoming this very interesting an interesting play with each other. And I think it resonates very deeply. I think so many people are afraid on, ironically, failing and succeeding at the same time. It almost makes no sense that, like, how are they happening at the same time? But even just saying that there, I could see why people feel like they're in such a state of flux, or they feel so stagnant because they're stuck between success and failure, this purgatory even between those two places, and just literally not doing anything because they're crippled by their own fears. So I don't even know where I was going with all that. I just was taking it for a ride. I liked your take on the humility. That, like I said, I haven't heard somebody describe it through that lens ever. So I appreciate that, man.
So good. And well, it sounds like you really understood what I meant though when you said it with the mask, because that mask is a lie. You knew exactly what I'm talking about, because a lot of the time we wear a mask to not only lie to other people and present a version of ourselves that isn't authentic. We put that mask on to lie to ourselves in the mirror, to downgrade our expectation of our lives. How many people do you know have chosen the easy path over the hard path because they expected they would fail? How many people do you know have chosen to lower their expectations in life? Like, let me give you an example. When you're a child, what does every child want? They want to be an astronaut. They want to be a doctor. They want to be an Air Force pilot, right? When you're a child, you're like, shit, I can achieve anything. And then you go to school and people put you down and you fail a few times and you're like, okay, maybe I'll just be a doctor, right? And then you go to high school and you fail a few more times. People put you down. You're like, okay, maybe I'll just go to uni and figure it out from there. And then you go to uni and you fail a few times, people put you down, and you're like, you know what? I just want to get a job, right? You see now, this is where life coaching comes in, because you reverse engineer that. You find out exactly where all that started, because all of these are just masks we put on. For example, when we introduce ourselves, like this is something I found huge in the past, right? Like when you go to meet someone that you haven't met before, and the first thing you say is, what do you do? And back in the day, I'd be like, oh, I'm a clinical research coordinator. And that's my mask. That's who I am. I'm not even Geoff as the individual as we talk about. I'm just this guy. I'm a role in society, right? And that makes sense. But also at the same time, it's like we downgrade ourselves, we downgrade our expectations so much to conform to a particular role. And then we sit through that. We sit through that until the end of our days, when we can have a couple of years off and hopefully retire if you're lucky enough to be in the first world. If you're not in the first world, then you'll be working till you're dead, basically. And that's just the reality of the world. But at the same time, it's that, being in the first world, having the leverage that we have, there's a lot of avenues, and letting fear control what you do. That idea might change lives. That idea might end poverty. That idea might have positive impact. You don't know what's in your head. Not you, but to the audience. You don't know what's in your head, and it may be you too, that could change the world. And you might not be acting on it. Maybe you've got a plan to like create something that, materializes water out of the air. Maybe you've got that. Maybe you're just not doing it. You could change lives. And, think of all the lives that have not been positively impacted because you chose not to act. And I guess what I'm getting to is like, fear affects more than just the individual. Fear affects everyone else that may have benefited or had their lives change if they followed through with their dream or their goal. You know what I mean?
I really like that take, because and that this still taps into that humility piece. I think, and again, I'm just exploring this thought right now. I think a lot of caregivers or caretakers, however people want to phrase themselves, people that would consider themselves like very generous and very caring and loving and whatever that is, stick to that identity, use that humility, but never allow themselves to grow to something bigger. But when they hear that they are not giving all that they could be and helping as many people as they could be, it changes the lens of like, oh, you cut yourself off. A lot of times I would see this, and perhaps when you see this with like people who are limiting themselves from making more money or whatever it is, a lot of people have a money belief, a self-limiting money belief. So they stop themselves from overcoming their poverty or their financial lackluster situation for fear that they're going to look bad by having more money, but not realizing with that idea and those financial resources, the next level of care and kindness and generosity and love they can bestow upon the world. And also take that idea that you're saying, like, what if they could just materialize X, Y, and Z out of their head? Having enough, I think a lot of people struggle with the reality of like, everything is a lot of things are marketing, and you need to have FaceTime, and people need to have a lot of FaceTime with your idea to then normalize to be like, oh yeah, that sounds really good. I'm in on that. Let's go with it. And that's how you can, build a movement. But you need resources to still be in front of people's eyeballs or share your voice or share your thoughts repeatedly. So I thought that your take there was really prudent for anybody who doesn't allow themselves to be more successful or reach for their goals, because for those people, hurting other people, like say they could have saved or helped 10,000 more people. Well, by not helping those 10,000 people, they were hurt more because of your inactivity. Ooh, like I think that framing for somebody who is very kind-hearted and maybe heart-centered might be another way of proposing it, is an easier way to like bring that into like, oh, like this is what you're not actually helping people as much as you could be, and you say you want to. Ooh, that was a powerful take, man. I really like that, and thank you for just kind of sitting with me as I sifted through my thoughts there. I see a lot of people, great people, shoot themselves in the foot. So that take was spot on, bro.
Thank you. And it was great to watch you deconstruct it as well, because as you were saying, you're a heart-centered individual. And there's two ways to see that. One way to see that is like in the sense of when we're talking about the mask and the humility, it's like, oh, you're overextending and that's too much. You just have what you need. And it's true, we only need so much. As humans, we actually need very little. But the more you have, the more you can give. Right? Let's say, for example, if you had should always give. That's what my core belief, right? Is that you don't need to have a lot to give. I think you should always give if you have extra, or if someone needs, just whatever, just give. If you have extra, give. If you don't have extra, then that's okay, like genuinely. But if somebody needs like some money or some food, give. But if, for example, you could spare $1 for a person, right? Or say, for example, if you could spare a lot more, as you were talking about in terms of money beliefs, is you could support a local charity. And actually, that's exactly what I'm doing right now. I have built a clothing brand that is affiliated to a local charity in my city for the homeless. And the reason I did this is because I'm passionate as heck about things like that. I'm passionate as heck about working with charity and community, but I'm also a busy man because I'm a businessman, I'm a coach. I do a lot of things where my time is valuable and my time is also difficult to come by. And I would love to be doing this stuff all day, every day if I could. But I also realize that that's ineffective because I'm one man. But I do realize that if I create a system to support a local charity, then that's doing far more than my efforts, because that's exponential. So I want to help and I still want to give, but this is how I'm going to do it. So my clothing brand donates 5% of every earning to this charity. And this charity is on the website. People can donate at any time as well. And that's just linking it together, creating avenues for people to do that. But if I were to say invest 2 hours of my time, I could only be there for 2 hours of my time. But this could invest, imagine like 50 hours, 60 hours of my time, right? The same amount. And I'm able to give to support people that need it. And in terms of that humility, is what you're talking about, is creating systems to help more people, because you can help one person or you can teach. You know the saying where you say like catch a fish and give it to a man, or teach a man how to fish and he eats forever, right? And I'm a big believer in that, is if you give people systems and you create systems and you create ways for people to get more out of life, you can help more people. That's why I do my coaching. I have my social media. I have my clothing brand. I want to spread this positive message. And it all started from Your Daily Purpose and reading that book. Can you believe that?
I love where stories just, they take a special turn. And I think so many people, well, that's what I love about that. It just like, it started with something very simple and it can grow into something else. I think when people put obscene expectations on something that are not, and you brought it up earlier and reiterated with me, but like so many people are just so caught up on this external variable. I'm going to do this only to just make the money. But like for you, it was driven by, I'm helping myself and I'm helping others. And here it's growing into a business, a clothing brand that also supports charity. And I mean, who the hell knows where it's going to go? Like, I'm sure
I
you're
have no idea.
exactly. And that's cool. But like, what I hear is that you keep grounding yourself and aligning yourself within your purpose, i.e., your daily purpose. Um, that's pretty cool, by just coming back to these fundamental principles of, dare I say, who you are. You're finding this velocity and this sense of direction with your life that continues to grow, and I'm going to imagine develop more prosperity internally and externally for you and for the people that are in your stead. I think that's really beautiful. And I hope people can start taking a message from that, and that it just starts with one habit. It doesn't have to be this massive undertaking, other than maybe you're making an Instagram post every day, or maybe it's going to the gym once a day, or whatever the thing is. For the record, that's what Naked Sunday was. I just spend every Sunday butt naked. So like, that's legit. That's how I lost like 40 pounds. And it was the same thing. It's the checking in by revisiting with those habits. I've talked about this quite a bit, but like when you come back to the same habit over and over and over again, you start to be able to see other aspects of the environment around you. If you're going to go squat every single day, well, in the beginning, you don't know how to squat. So you're just squatting. You're just learning the basic mechanics, the X's and the O's of this thing. But as you become more proficient, that's unconscious and you can just do it. And then you can be more aware of like maybe the music, or maybe you can be aware of the conversation, or you can be aware of the people around you, or the energy of the room, the culture of the room. And then you can impose your will upon that as well. But it comes back to, I just came and I squatted every day, or, name your thing. So I think that, and you're probably noticing at this point, I just usually just kind of go off into the ether with one thought or another. Hence the note, I can't really have much structure because I need the flexibility to breathe with it. But that's what really resonated with me when you talked about your daily purpose, and then you going to the gym every day. I think it's a really profound lesson where people try to make it more than it has to be. And I would even go so far as, when people try to do that, they are also doing that self-sabotage. They're immediately setting themselves up for failure because they don't even know where to start. They haven't built confidence in just doing the one thing. Until you do that, why are you adding more? You need stability. You need consistency in one thing to build, to be able to have a platform to put the next thing on, and the next thing. And just like I'm hearing with you, like, well, here you go. You got a clothing brand now. 2 years ago, I don't know if that was even a thought in your head. That's so cool that you're doing that.
And it's all aligned back because I know what my values are. I got very clear on what my values are. I got very clear on my mission. Like, I know what I want to do with my life. I want to create a positive impact in the world. And that's why it's not very hard for me to invest a lot of time and energy doing what I do, because I just feel energized. I work a lot. I train a lot. I train all the time. Still, I get it all done. And I still make time to see my friends and my family. I pack a lot into my life, and I don't feel burned out. I don't get burned out because I actually love what I do. Like, I feel like you only get burned out if you overextend yourself and you hate what you do. Well, then, that kind of makes sense. But for me, it's like, I love what I do. I can invest majority of my life in it. I'm totally cool with it because I actually love what I'm doing. It all comes back to my values. And, earlier you said something very, very interesting, which is a core belief of mine, right? So you said just before that one habit, and getting really, really clear on the mechanics of something, like, for example, how your hips go down when you squat, and how, you feel that thrust through your hammies when you push up and things like that. About that, right? You could feel that. And it all comes to something that I core and believe in, which is planting the seed, right? So for anything in life, especially in NLP, it's important to plant the seed in your noggin, meaning that if you want something, you have to plant the seed. So for me, I'd done that subconsciously for years, buying that life coaching course, buying that book by 50 Cent and Robert Greene. I could not have imagined this would how it would play out, but I had just planted the seed for myself. But the thing is about, once you start to plant the seed and you start to actually see some growth, and in this case, we'll talk about squatting, when you start to get really clear and good at doing something, that's building onto the path of mastery, right? So humans, the thing that is lost in today's society, Caleb, and it's one of the reasons why so many people are so unfulfilled, is because the art of mastery is dead. It's absolutely dead. We live in a world where, for example, I'm part of this Facebook group called Online Coaches and Consultants. Have you heard of it?
I might even be in it. I'm not sure. I might be. I don't remember, but I might be. I'm in a lot of groups for whatever reason, so I got invited. So anyway.
No, me too. And well, this particular group, when I first started coaching, I got spammed by like 30 people a day trying to sell me their services. It was awful. And I replied to them all because I was a new coach. And I was like, hey, I want to make new friends. And I replied to you. It drove me nuts for months, nonstop. Now that doesn't happen anymore because I'm established. But when I first started, it was insane. But the one thing I noticed is that nowadays everyone claims to be an expert. Everyone says, I can give you the best. Certainly there's one person that contacted me. He would have been no older than 19 years old. And he said, if you work with me for 90 days, I can give you $200,000 per month in revenue. And I was like, you can't. You're subcutting all of the mastery that happens. Like, do you know how much time? So our ancestors had an average span, right, of time in which they became a master. For example, as a blacksmith, you would have to train for 10,000 hours before you became a master. And 10,000 hours equates to about 10 years of apprenticeship. That's the average time for everything in the past to become a master. In today's world, you're a master if you go to the gym 3 times, right? You're a master if you know what I mean? You're a master if you put a selfie up and say, I've been training You're a master if you know, like do a couple of things and you just there's so much superficiality and so much glam over the process of actually going through the hard yards. And I feel like you understand where I'm coming from. I feel like you've been through the hard yards, but you know about it. And for me, going through the hard yards, I've realized that mastery is not overnight. If it took 10 years to become a master blacksmith doing one damn thing, how on earth could you be a master of your business within a year or even like 2 months? How on earth could you be a master coach? I see people calling themselves master coaches, and I'm like, how? How are you a master coach? If you've been like Tony Robbins, I get it, all right? But you've been a coach for like maybe 2 years. You're not Tony Robbins, right? For me, I'm always honest. I say I'm always learning. My whole goal is to learn and get better. I'm not a master. I'm just a student of life, right? I don't think I'm ever going to be a master. But that's a major problem because now you're subcutting all the learning and everyone feels they have to be an expert. And because of that feeling of, oh, I have to know everything to be valid, that's where you get all of these problems that occur right now because everyone feels like they have to be an expert. Like, say, for example, if they tried a new business, it has to be a success within 2 months. No, it doesn't. It's going to take time for you to learn what's going on. Even a new job, it's going to take time. But now it's like, oh, I have to be an expert straight away. And you can see now where that frustration and anger, and you can see where the unfulfillment comes from because everyone feels like they should be a master, they deserve to be one, but the process isn't there anymore. It's a forgotten art. And I study that a lot. I'm quite obsessed about it actually, about becoming a master of what I do.
There was so many little gems in what you brought out there. Let's see if I can unpack some of them. I'll take the first one on that I love, that you're like, I'm always learning. I love that. I wrote even a whole long blog post about it myself. Ironically, recently, my team, I'm trying to come up with what they call a whiplash statement. Great friend of mine, and she's a phenomenal networker. She's really great at like bringing people together. Her name's Christine Smith. Christine, if you're listening, you're awesome. But she came up with this thing called a whiplash statement. And it's like, think about like what whiplash is. It kind of like makes you turn your head, like, wait, what? And I've been like really fighting through this because I struggle with ever putting the idea of master, head coach, any of those things. Like the titles drive me nuts because anybody can just slap that label based off of what qualification. And the only thing I am certain of is that I will never, much like you said, I don't think I can ever be a master of anything because when you get really good at something, you realize you just scratched the surface. You know, like now the art of this thing, like in the beginning, it's the science, it's the hard stuff. Like, yeah, I can put it in a box, like you said before, the mechanics of a squat. You brought that out, like you feel the knees are tracking this way, and da 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 da. And then it goes into this art, and dare I even stretch it into the spiritual at this place. But even in now I'm not a big martial artist, but I've dabbled here and there, and I know a lot of people who have people who say once they achieve their black belt, then they're like, now my education began. Anybody who's been doing it for long enough, because you realize you know literally nothing at that point. You're like, great, you mastered like the basics, and then you see this one person who's been doing something for 30 years and they make something so complicated look so beautifully simple and effortless in a moment. You're like, I don't even know how that happened. How did they do that? Like, I get it in my mind, but like, how did they do? Like, I don't understand. Like, I have to learn how to do less. Anyway, coming back to the whiplash statement, I was like, you asked me kind of what do I do beforehand, and I do a lot of relationship coaching. So I came around to this one of student of love, because who am I to ever be a master over somebody's relationship? That's already a problem in the first place. I am not your guru, nor should I ever be. And if I die, your happiness should not depend on me being existing. Like, lead your own life, make your own decisions. I don't want that burden either. Having come from a past of some interesting stuff, we could talk about that later on. But I think that take that you had right there, if somebody instead, if we can make it glamorous and sexy to be, I am going to be a lifelong learner and I'm going to embrace that, the idea of recognition, call it master, call it guru, call it whatever, like, wow, they're so good at all those things. It kind of comes with the territory because you get good enough that nobody else is still there with you. Like, it's going to happen. When? I don't know. but at some point it's going to happen there. And I don't remember the first person I ever heard talk about the 10,000 hour rule, but I love that you brought that one out, because you just need enough repetitions. You don't have enough, even if you don't have enough time and attention, how do you understand all the other variables that go into that one task? Let's talk exercise. It's not just about doing the squat right there. Is it going to be with a bar on your back or in front of you or overhead? Are you going to have a knee problem that day? Are you going to have to modify it? What about your ankle? What about your stress in the rest of your life? What about, the breakup you're going through? What about your hydration? What about your lack of sleep last night? Like, those are all variables that are going to affect this moment in your life. That's a rep. It could be the same weight on the bar. It could be less weight on the bar than it was 3 weeks ago. That's a new rep. That's a different thing. And you're also a different person. So I love when you say that this 10,000 hour or even 10,000 reps, however you want to call it, that it's more about learning the context and the stuff around it. It's not about just this thing in this space and just this up and down thing. While you do need to know that, it's the other things to make it a sustainable habit, to get consistent success, to get consistent output. You need to understand all those things. So when you brought out that one, and I've heard the same, I've been coaching in some capacity, whether it's fitness, relationships, or businesses, for, I don't know, 2009. So we're looking at 13 years now. So yeah, I've seen when you brought that up, there's so many people call themselves, they're 2 months into owning a business and teaching people how to do anything. Bro, this is ridiculous. And I get it. What you talked about, it's like trying to keep up with the Joneses. How else am I supposed to make a living if I'm not a master? People who genuinely feel your heart and your soul in your work and understand your intent, and maybe your price is not what that of the experts are at that moment, but you'll grow to that. People who really value you as showing up as a good person will invest in you. I think that's something that's lost in there. And I'd be curious actually how that went with you. When you first said, I hang my shingle, as they say over here. It's I'm open for business, guys. What was that first process like for you?
It was very, very terrifying. I'll put it that way. See, for majority of my life, I had a debilitating fear of putting myself out there. I always wanted to do a lot of things in my life, and I just could not do it. I seriously, I was so afraid of even putting a story on Snapchat. It was just, it's crazy because right now, I post on social media all the time, videos of me talking, stories. It's just so natural to me now. I, in fact, love it. I'm a natural. But back in the day, when I first launched this business, I still remember, it was ready to be launched in the first week of August 2021. I worked incessantly for months building this, right? It was ready, and I just kept making excuses. I was like, I'll do it next week. I'll do it next week. I just sat on it and I made up all this bullshit to do, literally everything but just launching it. And it came to a point 3 weeks later where I was like, there's nothing else to do. I have to launch this business, otherwise I'm screwed. Because I moved to Melbourne, actually. I left Perth and moved to Melbourne to start this business. I quit my job and left Perth 3 weeks later. I was like, I had enough. I'm just going to change my entire life. Went to Melbourne. Yeah, I just went. I called up this dude on this app and I was like, hey man, can I stay with you? And he's like, yeah, no worries. So I just moved in with this guy. Yeah, I'm pretty easy going like that. I'm not too worried about stuff.
I love it. I love it. That's awesome.
I just always have a faith it's going to work out, so I just do it. And then, so I arrived there. I arrived on the day of a lockdown, basically at the start of a 5-month lockdown. So I'm in lockdown. It was crazy. I was in there the whole time for lockdown. And so you can imagine, I had no one to talk to. I had no friends. I knew no one in the city. My housemate was very antisocial, so he didn't talk to me. It was just me. And my anxiety was just racking up. I was like, oh man, how do I do this? It was crazy. And then I was just like, you know what? You just got to do it. You just got to get over your fear. And I still remember on the first day I launched, on all my socials, they say, okay, you can invite all your friends, right? So the day before, I went through and I wrote a list of tailor-made people I wanted to invite. I was like, oh, maybe they might like my page. Maybe they might like my page. I was overthinking the hell out of it. And then on the day itself, I sat there and I looked at this list and I looked at the amount of friends I have, and I was like, you haven't even picked 10% of the people on your friends list. So what I did was I was just like, you know what, I'm gonna close my eyes, I'm just gonna invite everyone. And I did it, and I got way more support than I ever thought I was gonna get.
Wow.
Seriously, like I got about a quarter of my entire. This doesn't count to anything, by the way. I don't validate myself based on acceptance like that, but it's more about the fact that I was so afraid of putting myself in front of people I knew, my friends, my family. And when I did it, it completely changed me. I was like, I felt like a brand new man on the other side of doing that because I did it on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. Um, it just completely changed me. I was like, wow, it wasn't even that bad. Consider your daily purpose. I only told a very few amount of people about that because I was so afraid of people knowing I was posting. So I would only say my actual life. I had at my heyday of your daily purpose about 3,500 followers. Only about 20 people from my life actually knew about it, maybe even less. So they were all people from around the world, different countries, everywhere, the USA, UK, just people I never knew that I was impacting. And when I started to launch this, I actually invited people I knew, and I was so terrified, man. When I did it, when I put that shingle, so you say, it completely changed everything. And it was still a lot of work, man. Like still a lot of fears I had to work through. Now I'm quite into the process. But for the first couple of months, the biggest was putting video up. Putting video up, I watched that video so many times. I watched it over and over and over again. I rewrote it, did the captions, I deleted it, brought it back up. Like it was a week-long process of just overthinking. And then I was like, you know what, just do it. And people loved it. People found it valuable. Because I judged my content based on whether people found it valuable. I don't care about likes or anything like that. It's if you find it valuable and you tell me it's valuable, man, like that's what I care about. I love seeing that. So when people tell me that, and they're like, this was really valuable, I was like, wow, it's all in your head. It's all 100% in your head because at that point, I was having a fear of judgment. It was something I had to work through this period of time. For majority of my life, I knew I had the fear of judgment, but I never wanted to overcome it. Now, a lot of my content is tailored around helping people overcome it because I had to overcome it just to launch this business, just to sit here and do a podcast with you. A couple of months ago, I would have bailed because I would have been so afraid when I first launched, right?
Wow.
That's how much has happened in a very short amount of time. I've had to confront myself a lot being a coach. And that's why I love doing this because every day there's always something I have to confront, whether it's public speaking, a webinar, a podcast, putting myself out there, doing a talk in the real world, putting out content, videos. I'm always overcoming my fears and I love that. I really do love it.
Dude, I couldn't be happier for you. And I admire anybody who does confront their fears and insecurities. And there was one thing you brought up in there. It was your fear of letting your friends and family know that you were doing this thing.
Yeah.
Isn't that, I find that to be so ironic that that is such a common thing that I hear about what people are actually afraid of. I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's this fear of being rejected by these people that say they love you and value you. And like you've built this relationship around like, this is the identity I know how to live in. I'm going to try this other thing. Are you going to still love me then? It's this.
That's so true.
I'd love to hear your take on that.
That you actually encapsulated it perfectly because that was actually a perfect encapsulation. It's like, yeah, it's like, here I am, Geoff. Everyone knew me as the guy who partied hard, did drugs, smoked weed. That's certain people. Other people knew me as the guy that was a really good on the ball clinical research coordinator, always hardworking, getting it done. Other people knew me just as Geoff from the school days, right? Just the guy that just used to mess around and just be the funny dude in school. But now I was transitioning to something that really meant something to me. And I was very afraid on whether people would accept that. And, you can only say this in retrospect, but looking back in retrospect, it's really silly. It's really silly. But like at the time, you try and like rationalize it by putting yourself in everyone's shoes, saying like, oh, would they like it? Would they judge it? Would they agree with it? Would they hate it? And it drove me nuts, especially being all alone in Melbourne, having no one to talk to. Like it was pretty rough, man. Like I was just in my head for weeks, and then I was like, you know what, you have to do this. And ever since then, man, things have just completely changed. Going to Melbourne, and a couple of things happened in Melbourne. The main thing was confronting myself. When there's no one around you, when there's no one to talk to, when there's nowhere to go because it's lockdown, you are just you versus you. And you got to confront a lot of shit. And especially launching this, which is designed to help other people, marry these two together, and a lot of change happens in a short amount of time.
Dude, I just like talking to you. I like listening to you. You're a
Thanks,
good
man.
guy. You're just a good guy. That
Appreciate
that
it.
baseline. But you brought out something there. What I heard in this transition for you, it's like not too worried if people rejected you, if you're party animal, that kind of thing, because it's almost like, hey, this is thought of as a joke. Like whatever. If I'm not succeeding with this, whatever, because it's not serious. Next one up is like, well, this is just clinical and practical and like cool. It's in a box and it's easy to be accepted by because I can earn a paycheck and I can easily check the box on my job. But what I hear now in this new transition, this new phase in your life, and I'll bring this thought full circle in a second, where I resonate very deeply with you. It's like this is more like a part of your soul. This is more a part of like who you are and what really drives you. And like it's not just your head or just rampant feelings of like nihilism of just party out. Like this is like marrying those two things together. And there's a lot of like competency that you developed from a lot of hard work, but then also like a lot of inner work that you did to align these two things. And like, oh wait, like this is the thing I wanted. I really want this. I really care about this. Now will those people still be around? Like that's what I heard. And I'm gonna echo the same thoughts, man. I knew how to be a good athlete in high school, knew how to be a good student, didn't care too much. It was easy. Moved to college, knew how to do the same thing, but knew how to then become like a good athlete or like good at teaching, coaching, fitness stuff. And then when it started to turn like that's not enough, it's not scratching the whole itch. And I am here with you, man. When I started saying like I want to start talking about love, like what? Who's this guy getting all sensitive? I thought you were just this dude who takes his shirt off and like walks around butt naked. Like, no, like let's talk about the real thing. I am right there with you, man. The fear about like posting the first thing about something mildly sensitive. Oh my dear God. So, bro, I commend you for that alone, just because it takes a lot. And much to what you're saying before, like in hindsight, it does look silly. And I like the way you said that, because my hope is anybody who's listening to this, it's looking to go on some transformational journey with their life and their work and their purpose or whatever that's going to look like and who they're going to associate with. I love how you said it. In hindsight, it will look silly. So if somebody can maybe take that like imaginary time travel into the future and look back on the moment where you're feeling this way, be like, oh, I'm going to look back and I'm going to think this is silly. I don't know, something as the way you said it just maybe like, oh, that would take the edge off like that, because when you come back to it, it's just like, oh, this is just a moment in the story. And I had to learn this thing anyway, so let's do it. So I just thought of it like it's almost like a really practical way of thinking through a problem like that.
Yeah, it really is. That's a good way of putting it.
Time travel.
Yeah, that's actually genius. Put yourself into the shoes of someone who has moved past this fear and reverse engineer that feeling of knowing that it was necessary to become that. I like that. That's good.
I mean, I'm chock full of them sometimes, bro.
Yeah, starting to say that. It's good.
My wife just rolls her eyes at me when I get going with most of my stuff. She's like, oh God, here he's talking again. I was talking with my mother last night on the phone. And she's like, does your wife listen to it? And my wife's sitting next to her next to me on the couch, and she just rolls her eyes. And I was like, no, she hasn't listened to a single episode. She's been on one episode, mind you, with me. Her response is, I get a walking podcast all day long. I got my full dose of all this shit. I am good. I'm tapped out. I would just be hearing the same thing over. Whatever. But dude, oh my God. I don't even know where I was going any of those thoughts either, but I just something that is sticking out to me right now. Again, I met you barely an hour ago. I gotta say again, I love your company. I love just listening to talking with you. I love what you're doing. I think that that's really cool. And I've had thoughts about apparel company stuff doing the same thing, donating to charity. I think that's a really cool way to integrate that stuff. But also what I think is powerful about what's happening right now is, bro, you're on the other side of the world. literally.
Yeah, it's cool, right?
Dude, it's like the crack of dawn for you right now. As I just like put that together in my head, it's 11:15 for me right now. AM. Like it can't be early. It's got to be like really early, or I guess considered late at night for you. But here we are having a meaningful conversation. And my hope is that anybody listening who went through the pandemic feeling very lonely can realize there's people out there who are willing to have a conversation. You just got to go looking, and you got to be willing to confront some shit along the way. Because what you said 2-3 months ago, you just started like posting more, or doing more video, or just getting on podcasts and doing more, whatever you want to call it, public speaking. And here you are now. I mean, we're an hour and 15 minutes into this, I think, really powerful conversation, meaningful conversation. We're not talking about, oh, the sky's blue today and like there was no rain. Like, I don't want to hear surface level shit. Like, let's talk about some real things. Let alone we're two men talking about this stuff. Like, I think that is profoundly beautiful. I really do. And I just got to say, I appreciate you and just sharing the space with me right now, man, because this has been a lot of fun just to hear you talk about your thoughts on the world and how you've grown through so much stuff, man.
It's a mutual feeling, Caleb. I feel like I've known you for a long time, even though you're right, it has been like 1 hour, but I feel like I've known you for a while. It's kind of strange. Sometimes you just get there with people. It's just like, I feel like I've known you for a while. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this is just the beginning of, I hope, a long friendship, my friend. To that effect, I feel like you've shared your purpose throughout all of this stuff. What would somebody's listening in right now? They're like, hey, I am a millennial and I am feeling a lot of the same things. Maybe not a drug addiction, or maybe not alcohol, maybe not that stuff. Maybe like they're just feeling a little lost and they're like, I dig this guy's vibe. He sounds like he's been where I feel, and I want to be connected to that. What would be the best way for somebody to get in touch with you, to connect with you?
The best way to reach out to me is via Facebook or Instagram. You can find me at MindAxis, so Mind AXIS Life Coaching, MindAxis Life Coaching. And on LinkedIn, you can find me by my name, Geoff Seow. And my website is mindaxislifecoaching.com.au. And if you reach out to me at any time, I will always respond. I spend a lot of my time actually speaking to many people. I love it. It's the best part of my job, actually. So reach out anytime. Let's have a chat. And even if you just want to chat, that's cool. Reach out and let's see where that goes.
I love it. And for everybody who's listening, I'm going to put all the contact information in the show notes. So if you couldn't write all that stuff down, I'll get it there. But you've heard it now twice. You get the auditory. We're getting like the multi-angle kinesthetic awareness kind of learners. We got them all taken care of in many ways, shapes, and forms. And I believe you already sent me all those links anyway too. So, bro, again, it's been an absolute pleasure getting to know you. I look forward to continue to support you. I love the t-shirt idea. I'm going to definitely talk with you more about some of your experiences within that. Any other parting thoughts just for our listeners today, man?
Yeah, it's one thing I always share when I go on podcasts or even just like speak in general. It's one thing I always do. It's my parting statement is this. It's like time is short. You've got one life. You only have so much time to achieve all the things that you want and live the life that you know you could live. You've got to really respect that you don't have forever, and the fact that time will run out can be a primary motivator, because when you are so aware of the fact that time is passing you by, you know you can't waste time. You know that life you want to live, that you've dreamed about, is just on the horizon. All you have to do is start taking some action today and make good use of your time.
That's a beautiful way to end the episode, my friend. And again, thank you so much for your time and your efforts and your energy. I'm supremely grateful, man. And I'm just so happy we got a chance to get to know each other. And everybody, again, show notes will have his contact information. Get in touch with Geoff. He's an awesome dude and make some great changes in your life. So that's all I got for today, peoples. Until next time, I remind you to love everybody.